Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki, Sharma, Upadhyay. Let's get started. Should India's private sector venture into space? It's a question that has long been debated. It's a question that has been raised with every milestone of India's space program. Today, this question has been answered. India has opened the doors for the private sector to enter the space domain. Prime Minister Modi launched the Indian Space Association today. It's another major step towards self-reliance, a step that will help India become a space superpower. Private players are already placing bets. Projects are already being vetted. How will this transform the industry? How big is the industry in India and the world over? And how do these moves impact our lives? Space, as the Prime Minister said, may seem distant, but it's an integral part of our daily lives. It drives modern communication, among other things. So any growth in the Indian space sector will have a direct bearing on our lives. On Gravitas tonight, we'll explain how, and we'll also recount the spectacular journey of India's space program. Also on the show, the India-China border talks have broken down with a war of words. China rejects India's proposals as unrealistic and fails to offer any of its own. Where does it leave both the sides? We'll discuss that. Another revelation of sexual abuse in the Catholic Church. Another apology from the Pope. But where is reform and transparency? We'll bring you a special report on that. In Sri Lanka, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa makes a rare admission. He says his government is quote-unquote not delivering. We'll tell you what prompted him to say this. And a question that every salaried person struggles with. Should you be asking for a pay hike? Indira Nui has a tip and we don't agree with her. We'll tell you all about it. We begin as always with Gravitas Global Headlines.
One junior Indian Army commissioner and 4 soldiers have been killed in an encounter in Kashmir's Poonch district. 2 more operations took place in the Kashmir Valley, one in Anantnag district of South Kashmir, where 1 terrorist was killed, and the other in the Hajin Bandipora region. In an exclusive conversation, Taliban's Deputy Information Minister and Chief Spokesperson Zabiullah Mujahid tells WION that Taliban's forces are working to eradicate ISIS and that the Taliban government needs global economic support for Afghan residents to live a good life. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi spoke to his UK counterpart Boris Johnson. The discussions focused on the agenda for 2030, COP26 and regional issues including Afghanistan. Amid increasing Islamic State terror attacks in Afghanistan, the United States and Britain have warned their citizens, urging them to not stay in Kabul hotels. The 2021 Nobel Prize for Economic Sciences has been awarded in one half to Canadian-born David Card and the other half jointly to Israeli-American Joshua Angrist and Guido Imbens from Stanford University. US drug maker Merck has sought FDA nod for its COVID-19 treatment pill. If authorized, the pill will be the first such antiviral treatment anywhere in the world. The Mexican Navy seized 2.4 tons of methamphetamines and other drugs from a speedboat. The bust took place high at sea in the Mexican state of Baja California. 2 helicopters and boat patrols were used to catch the speedboat. Sydney hairdressers, gyms, cafes and bars reopened to fully vaccinated customers for the first time in more than 100 days after Australia's largest city achieved a vaccination benchmark.
To all those particularly in Sydney and across New South Wales today who are opening up today, enjoy the moment, Enjoy it with your family, enjoy it with your friends. I'm looking forward to seeing my family as well, having come out of this quarantine.
Some restrictions were lifted after 70% of the New South Wales state population aged 16 and older were fully vaccinated. World champions France have won the second edition of the UEFA Nations League after beating Spain 2-1 in the final in Milan. Mikel Oyarzabal put Spain ahead after a dull first half, but Karim Benzema scored a stunning equalizer 2 minutes later, while Kylian Mbappé completed the turnaround with a contentious winner 10 minutes from time. Olympic champion Alexander Zverev has become the fourth player to qualify for the season-ending ATP Tour Finals. The third seed overcame 20-year-old American Jenson Brooks beat 6-4, 3-6, 6-1 in his opener at the Indian Wells Masters and will now take on former world number 1 Andy Murray, who rallied from a set down to beat Spanish rising star Carlos Alcaraz.
Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos are about to get a run for their money. Indians are entering the commercial space race. It's a big shift for India's space program, the biggest space reform in India, you could say. Prime Minister Narendra Modi launched the Indian Space Association today. It opens the doors for Indian companies to enter space, and this is going to be a game changer. India is already a formidable player in space. ISRO, or the Indian Space Research Organization, is known for low-cost, high-output missions. Now, with the entry of the private sector, India's space program is gearing up to dominate the race, and that's what we'll discuss tonight. Which companies are entering the space market? What will they do in space? What's the business opportunity? How will this help India become a space superpower? And what does it mean for you and me? That's our cover story tonight on Gravitas. Let's start with the announcement. The creation of the Indian Space Association. Prime Minister Modi launched it today. It's an industry body. It's a collective of sorts. It brings together officials from ISRO and a clutch of private companies. Which are these companies? There's Bharti Airtel, OneWeb, MapMy India, Larsen & Toubro, Tata Group's Nelco and Walchand Nagar Industries. Also Anant Technology Limited. These are all private companies and they're the founding members of the Indian Space Association. It's a collective voice of the Indian space sector. Well, what do they plan to do? Prime Minister Modi laid out 4 key objectives. Number 1, give the private sector the freedom to innovate. Number 2, help the government play the role of an enabler for the private sector. Number 3, prepare the talent to take India's space industry forward. And number 4, ensure that space is used for the common good. So the emphasis is on dramatically expanding the range of services India can offer to the world in space.
प्राइवेट सेक्टर को इनोवेशन की आजादी, दूसरा सरकार की एनेबलर के रूप में भूमिका, तीसरा भविष्य के लिए युवाओं को तैयार करना और चौथा स्पेस सेक्टर को सामान्य मानवी की प्रगति के संसाधन के रूप में देखना। इन चारों पिलर्स की बुनियाद अपने आप में असाधारण संभावनाओं के द्वार खोलती है।
So what will the participation of the private sector look like? What can they do? Well, to start with, they can build rockets for ISRO, build satellites on their own and use ISRO facilities to send both rockets and satellites into space. In fact, work has already begun in this direction. Private companies are making their first bets. They're pouring money into satellite internet. An agreement was signed today. ISRO will send satellites from OneWeb into space. This is a British subsidiary of India's telecom giant Airtel. OneWeb is building a satellite internet network. It wants to send 648 satellites into space. What do they want so many satellites for? 648. For improving connectivity. Once these satellites are installed, they will beam signals for high-speed internet to customers. And with this technology, internet will reach remote areas. It will reach those regions which cannot be connected through wires. So this is significant, not just for their businesses, but also for people in far-flung areas. They'll all be able to come online. And this is just the beginning. India's private space sector is in its infancy. The room for expansion is immense. In this case, Even the sky is not the limit. The global space business is worth $440 billion today. What's India's share? Just 2%. And that's because India has only one player, ISRO. Opening up the space sector will not just benefit ISRO, it could impact a range of areas. It's going to boost foreign investment. As we speak, the government of India is considering 27 proposals. They come from a range of private companies in India and around the world. These companies want to work with India on space-related activities. From building launch vehicles to research projects, they want to do all of this. Space privatization will also create jobs. Going by one estimate, it will create nearly 200,000 jobs. It will also empower the startup space. There are 24 space tech-related companies in India, 24, but they haven't been able to make much of a difference because the sector was closed to private entities. But now these companies can accomplish major projects in partnership with ISRO. As we said, the potential is immense. So far, India's space program had one player and limited resources. Imagine what can be done if private players join in. Let me show you some numbers on what India has accomplished already. India's first mission to Mars, Chandrayaan, was completed with a budget of $74 million. In comparison, NASA spent $671 million to send an orbiter mission to Mars. The European Union spent $400 million on its Mars Express orbiter. Japan, $190 million. Russia, $117. Do you see the cost effectiveness of the Indian program? Similarly, ISRO's mission to the moon, Chandrayaan, had a budget of $142 million. It was cheaper than a long list of Hollywood blockbusters on space. It also made a historic discovery. It was India's Chandrayaan that found water on the moon. India easily beats all major global space programs when it comes to cost, and that's something that the Prime Minister also underlined in his address today.
आज जब इंफॉर्मेशन एज से हम स्पेस एज की तरफ बढ़ रहे हैं, तब इस एफिशिएंसी की ब्रांड वैल्यू को हमें और सशक्त करना है. स्पेस एक्सप्लोरेशन की प्रोसेस हो या फिर स्पेस टेक्नोलॉजी की एप्लीकेशन, एफिशिएंसी और अफोर्डेबिलिटी को हमें निरंतर प्रमोट करना है. अपनी ताकत से जब हम आगे बढ़ेंगे तो ग्लोबल स्पेस सेक्टर में हमारी हिस्सेदारी का बढ़ना तय है. अब हमें स्पेस कंपोनेंट्स के सप्लायर से आगे बढ़कर एंड टू एंड स्पेस सिस्टम की सप्लाई चेन का हिस्सा बनना है.
Efficiency and affordability, that's what the Indian space program is known for. Now, India's private sector can help in taking that to the next level. And this is very significant because of where India started. India's space journey began on a bicycle. This one. This cycle is ferrying a rocket cone. It belongs to India's first rocket, one that India procured from the United States and launched from the site of a church. The year was 1963. The sleepy town of Thumba in Kerala had caught the attention of Dr. Vikram Sarabhai, the father of India's space program. In his opinion, the fishing village of Thumba was perfect for India's inaugural launch. A church was located at the site of the Earth's magnetic equator. If India wanted a glitch-free blast-off, it needed to secure the perfect launch site. So the church's reverend decided to help. He invited the scientists for a Sunday mass. He told the villagers about India's space dreams. After the villagers' nod, the reverend handed over the church to these scientists. Now, there were no labs in Thumba, so cattle sheds had to be turned into laboratories and storage units. There were also no canteens, so scientists working on this project had to ride to the nearest railway station for their meals. There was just one car, it was a busy jeep, so payloads and rocket parts were transported on bicycles. That is how India launched its first rocket. The year, remember, 1963. The date, the 21st of November. And it was the beginning of India's space journey. India had just gotten started. Within 4 years, India built its own rocket from the experience it gathered in Thumba, the RH-75. It was India's first indigenous rocket. It was launched in 1967. By 1975, India had built its own satellite. It was named Aryabhat, after the Indian astronomer, and launched from Russia. Back in Bangalore, a toilet was converted as the satellite's data receiving center. Amazing stories. India came together to celebrate Aryabhat. The satellite's photo was printed on Indian currencies between 1976 and 1977. Aryabhat made ISRO a household name. It was started in 1962 as the Indian National Committee for Space Research. In 1969, it was renamed the Indian Space Research Organization, ISRO. India's love affair with astronomy was dated further back in history to the year 499. That's when Aryabhat began writing on space. There was no paper then, so it was on a palm leaf that Aryabhat noted that the Earth was round and rotated on its axis. In the year 598, Brahmagupta was trying to calculate the circumference of the planet. In 1981, when India was trying to launch its first communication satellite called Apple, scientists needed a metal-free mode of transport to ferry the payload and to conduct an antenna test in an open field. The payload was ready, but the challenge was to find a metal-free vehicle. What could that be? Even cycles have metal. So India's legendary Jugaad once again came to the rescue. The payload was carried on a bullock cart. Take a look at this photo. India's space journey has many such memorable milestones. Take 1984, for example. Rakesh Sharma became the first Indian to fly to space. He was an Air Force pilot. He was on board the Soviet Union's Soyuz T-11 that went to space. Sharma and other crew members held a press conference from the skies. Indira Gandhi was the Prime Minister of India then. Their exchange is etched in the memory of every Indian.
ऊपर से भारत कैसा दिखता है आपको?
जी मैं बगैर किसी झिझक के कह सकता हूँ कि सारे जहां से अच्छा.
In 2014, India was once again filled with pride when it became only the fourth country in the world to reach Mars. What's more, Chandrayaan also became the world's most cost-efficient Mars mission, a title the mission still holds. Chandrayaan cost India 4.5 billion rupees. That's $74 million, which is less than what Hollywood spent on making the movie called Gravity. It had a budget of $100 million. Even the movie Martian cost more than Chandrayaan. India has come a long way with a small budget. There was a time India would use foreign launch pads. Today, India launches foreign satellites from its soil. Till date, India has launched 342 foreign satellites of 34 countries. India has conducted 112 space missions, 82 launch missions, 2 re-entry missions. India has also sent 12 student satellites into space. Remember the sleepy village of Tumba? Today it is home to VSSC, the Vikram Sarabhai Space Center. ISRO has as many as 45 such centers around the country. With every launch, it brings space exploration closer to the heart of Indians. The country stayed up all night tracking Chandrayaan 2. The mission did not manage to safely touch down on the moon when images of a teary-eyed ISRO chief made Indians more resolute than ever to not let anything come between India and its space dreams. Today, Dr. K. Sivan, Kalpana Chawla, Rakesh Sharma, they're among India's tallest idols. Space dominated India's popular culture. We've had an ISRO top scientist as president. This is Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam working at ISRO in his early days. India has taken huge leaps since. Today, it is privatizing space exploration, supporting innovation, creating newer groups to further India's space journey. Today, India is looking to build its own space stations and create its very own fort in the space age. They say space is the next frontier. Perhaps it will be. But first we need to also settle the land frontiers. Unfortunately, that's easier said than done. Because some countries do not understand basic political concepts like sovereignty, restraint and peace. Countries like China. Since June last year, India and China have been engaged in a standoff in eastern Ladakh. This was after the clashes at the Galwan Valley. A lot of troop movements, a lot of new constructions. There have been talks to defuse the situation, 13 rounds of talks to be precise. The latest round was on Sunday. Indian and Chinese commanders met at the Chushul-Moldo border point. Nobody was expecting a breakthrough. Nobody was expecting China to play fair. They did what they do best, sabotage. After 13 rounds, the talks have broken down. Both sides are blaming each other. But the story here is not the breakdown. The story here is the manner of the breakdown. Look at what they said. Let me show you the official statements from both sides, starting with India. This is what it says. During the meeting, the Indian side made constructive suggestions for resolving the remaining areas. But the Chinese side was not agreeable and also could not provide any forward-looking proposals. The meeting thus did not result in resolution of the remaining areas. In other words, India is saying that China is not interested in a resolution. They rejected India's proposals and did not have any ideas of their own. What does China say? Let me quote again. Instead of misjudging the situation, look at the use of words. The Indian side should cherish the hard-won situation in China-India border areas. The Chinese side made great efforts to promote the easing and cooling of the border situation. However, notice this. However, the Indian side still persisted in its unreasonable and unrealistic demands. In other words, be happy with how far we've come. Don't expect any more progress. Now, those are some sharp words. You don't expect this kind of language in official statements, especially on such sensitive issues. Let me tell you what happened at the last round of talks, the 12th round, the one before this one. There was a joint statement, by the way. The talks were called candid and in-depth. The meeting was described as constructive. Same with the 11th round of talks. There was agreement on 3 points: stability on the ground, avoiding new incidents, and peace at the border. Now, none of these talks were a grand success, yes, but most of them ended in a stalemate. How is this one different? Because we've gone from a deadlock to a breakdown. These are two very different things, and it is clear who is at fault here. There are 6 flashpoints in eastern Ladakh. 4 of them have been vacated, which leaves us with 2, Depsang and Hot Springs. India's demand is quite clear. I'm going back to the official statement. This is what it says. The Indian side pointed out that the situation along the LAC, the line of actual control, can be caused by unilateral attempts of Chinese side to alter the status quo. It was therefore necessary that the Chinese side take appropriate steps in the remaining areas so as to restore peace and tranquility. Makes sense. You make a mess, you clean it up. But China does not agree. Their spokesperson says the Indian statement is groundless. Listen to this.
The relevant remarks of the Indian side are groundless. At the 13th round of China-India military-to-military talks, the Chinese side, bearing in mind the overall interest of relations between the two countries and the two militaries, made great efforts to ease the tension along the border and fully demonstrated its sincerity.
You don't have to be a political mastermind to see what's happening here. China was never interested in the talks. They wanted to keep the border situation active. So talks on one side, belligerence on the other. Take the incident on the 30th of August, for example. 100 PLA troops crossed the line of actual control near Uttarakhand. They damaged a bridge before returning. Does this sound like a country pursuing peace? The fact is, Beijing has already made up its mind. It doesn't want meaningful talks. It wants the facade of talks. And that's not new. What's different this time is that India has had enough of it. So for the first time, India has directly blamed the Chinese side in public. What happens next is a question. We could be looking at a more militarized LAC, more troops, more infrastructure, a lot like the LOC, or the line of control. That's the boundary separating Jammu and Kashmir and Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. That's what we call the LOC, line of control. It's a live boundary, which means there is heavy troop deployment. There's frequent firing, even infiltrations. You could see the same happening with the LAC, the line of actual control. That's India's border with China. And let me tell you how this is bad news. The LOC is around 776 kilometers long, the India-Pakistan border, or parts of it. The LAC, the border with China, is 3,488 kilometers long. That's around 5 times longer. The LAC was always disputed, but it was not a live boundary. It was not like the LOC. There were no eyeball-to-eyeball confrontations. Now, with the talks breaking down on Sunday, that could change. The LAC could become a live line. The LAC could be the LOC now. What does that mean? You will need more troops, you'll need more infrastructure, more weapons to cover this border with China. And with winter coming, you could see more standoffs. There could be casualties like we saw in Galwan. The Himalayan frontier could become the biggest flashpoint in Asia. The question is there a fix to this breakdown? Well, both sides have agreed to keep communication lines open, but you have to ask, what's the point? As long as China does not change its mind, these talks will not progress. And China has new reasons to extend this deadlock, like the Quad Summit in Washington, D.C. India is the only Quad nation, remember, that shares a border with China. Is this their way of getting even? Well, with China, you never know. Pointless or not, the talks were an insurance. But as they say, it takes two to tango. China was never engaged in these discussions, and now India's patience is running thin. Pakistan, meanwhile, is in a state of grief. It is mourning the demise of Abdul Qadir Khan, the father of Islamabad's nuclear program. A national hero for the people of Pakistan, a dangerous villain for the rest of the world, A.Q. Khan passed away on Sunday afternoon. He succumbed to complications related to the Wuhan virus. He was accorded a state funeral by the Pakistan government. Thousands attended the last rites in Islamabad. The body was carried by an honor guard. Top military generals led the funeral prayers. Politicians expressed their grief to the press. And flags across Pakistan were at half-mast. Such outpouring of grief for a man the world considered a villain speaks a lot about the complexity of A.Q. Khan. What did he do to deserve such admiration by Pakistanis? And why did the rest of the world consider him a man as dangerous as Osama bin Laden? Here's a report on all you need to know.
There was never ever any kind of authorization for these activities by the government.
The year was 2004. A global nuclear proliferation scandal had just been unearthed. It involved the sales of nuclear secrets to North Korea, Iran, and Libya. In the crosshairs of this entire scandal was one man, Abdul Qadir Khan. He was accused of selling these nuclear secrets illegally, something he confessed to on Pakistan's national television.
I wish to place on record that those of my subordinates who have accepted their role in the affair were acting in good faith, like me, on my instructions. I also wish to clarify that there was never ever any kind of authorization for these activities by the government. I take full responsibility for my actions and seek your pardon.
This confession may or may not have been under duress, but it marked the beginning of Abdul Qadir Khan's downfall. The father of Pakistan's nuclear program was thrown off his demigod pedestal, put under house arrest for the next 5 years, forced to live a life of obscurity. On Sunday, he passed away, isolated and lonely. But in death, he is being treated as a national hero.
Yesterday, a great man died. He was a great scientist. He served this country. He served this country with emotion, dignity, respect, and with hard work.
Born in Bhopal in 1936, Abdul Qadir Khan migrated to Pakistan after the partition. He acquired a degree in science at the University of Karachi, then went on to study metallurgical engineering in Berlin, and completed his advanced studies in the Netherlands and Belgium. In 1975, a year after India tested its first nuclear device, Khan, who was working in Holland, offered his services to Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. The Pakistani Prime Minister wanted his country to have its own nuclear program. He put Abdul Qadir Khan in charge of the government's nascent uranium enrichment project. The Dutch suspected him of stealing blueprints for making centrifuges. But he returned to Islamabad before any action could be taken. In 1976, he launched Khan Research Laboratories. He did this with the help of a clandestine network of European friends. They supplied him critical components for building nukes. From here, there was no stopping Abdul Qadir Khan. For the next 25 years, he led Pakistan's nuclear program, cultivated the image of a national hero, and changed the very landscape of nuclear proliferation. How? By turning his network outwards. By going from import to export. Abdul Qadir Khan secretly struck deals with a range of countries, regimes the West considered rogue states. Whether he acted alone or with the blessings of his government remains a mystery. But his actions had lasting implications on global security. Iran's centrifuge program at Natanz was built based on designs and materials supplied by Abdul Qadir Khan. He also made more than a dozen visits to North Korea, where nuclear technology was exchanged in return for expertise on missile technology. These revelations were made in 2003, when a group of CIA and MI6 officials in Libya received a stack of brown envelopes. The envelopes contained the design for a nuclear weapon. Those designs had been supplied by Abdul Qadir Khan. The CIA exposed his role in global nuclear proliferation. Former CIA Director George Tenet described him as being as dangerous as Osama bin Laden. The Pakistani leadership under General Pervez Musharraf distanced itself from any knowledge of these dealings. They let Abdul Qadir Khan take all responsibility. He was reportedly forced to make a televised confession and lived the rest of his life under surveillance. Neither free nor really confined. He was stopped from traveling or talking to the outside world. Now he has passed away, and so the full story of what he did and under whose instructions may never really be known. Report WION World is One.
Our next story can be summed up with a Wikipedia page. Let me show you what it looks like. Catholic Church sexual abuse cases. That's right, an entire Wikipedia page is dedicated to sexual abuse by the church. Tells you how big the problem is. Everyone knows about it. The Pope, the bishops, the parishioners, everybody. Then how do so many priests get away with it? Because the church covers it up. They silence survivors, they block investigations, they hide these crimes until they're too big to cover up. That's what happened in France. Investigators found that 300,000 children, 300,000, had been sexually abused by the clergy. Who are the perpetrators here? Men of God, trusted lieutenants of the Catholic Church. Clearly the system is broken. The church is tormenting the same people it is supposed to serve. What does Pope Francis plan to do? He started off with an apology. He says this is a moment of shame for him, for Catholics and for the church.
I wish to express to the victims my sadness and pain at the trauma they have suffered, and also my shame, our shame, my shame at the church, who for too long failed to consider their concerns as it should have. I offer them my prayers. I pray, and together we all pray, To you, Lord, the glory, to us the shame. This is the time for shame.
Now, I know what you're thinking. Wow, an apology from the Pope. Surely the Church will reform itself now. Well, think again. Pope Francis is not the first to apologize for sexual abuse crimes. That would be Pope John Paul II. He apologized way back in 2001. He said sexual abuse was a profound contradiction to the teachings of Jesus. Then came Pope Benedict XVI. He apologized in 2008. 10 years later, his successor, Pope Francis, has also apologized. You see, this has become a pattern. The Church is implicated in horrendous crimes. There is international outrage. The Pope apologizes, and then we move on. But what next? Where are the reforms? These abuse cases are not isolated incidents. The Church consistently puts itself above survivors. In April this year, a group of United Nations experts sent a letter to the Vatican. This is what they wrote. The experts noted the persistent allegations of obstruction and lack of cooperation by the Catholic Church with domestic legal proceedings. They also noted the concordats and other agreements negotiated by the Holy See with states that limit the ability of church authorities to question and compel the production of documents or prosecute people associated with the Catholic Church. This is classic obstruction of justice. The Church is basically protecting sexual predators. It is denying justice to thousands of abuse survivors. And this is becoming the Vatican way. Whether it's legal cases, financial dealings, or political reforms, there is no transparency in the Catholic Church. And remember, we're not talking about some privately held company. This is the Catholic Church. It has 1.3 billion followers in the world. Transparency is non-negotiable. The question is, how can it be achieved? This is a 2,000-year-old institution. It is programmed to resist change. Only one person can possibly make a difference, and that's the Pope himself. Pope Francis has unveiled a new plan for the Church, a 2-year consultative process. It has 3 steps. Number 1, the listening phase, where parishioners can discuss a wide range of topics in their local church. Number 2 is the continental phase, where bishops will gather and discuss what they heard at their church. And step number 3 is the universal phase, where bishops will meet at the Vatican for a month-long meeting. And this meeting is scheduled for October 2023. It's 2 years away. Again, it sounds like great news. They're finally doing something. But the Pope has a condition. Discuss all you want, but the final decisions lie with me. Well, what's the point then? The Catholic Church needs a major overhaul, and it must start at the top. You cannot function like a secret society in 2021. You must be transparent. You must embrace change. And for that, the Pope must take responsibility. He must stop obstructing investigations. He must disown sexual predators. And he must put the rule of law above image building. The time for apologies has passed. The Church must act now or risk backlash from its own followers. What about the United Kingdom? It too seems to be engaging in cover-ups. Britain appears to be blocking an investigation into a certain sex abuse case. It involves one British royal, the Queen's second son, Prince Andrew. He has been accused of sexually abusing a 17-year-old. This happened some 20 years ago. The British police had previously declared that no one is above the law. Now, the same police says it won't take action against Prince Andrew. Well, here's a question. Are British royals above the rule of law then?
No one is above the rule of law. And no one should believe this in Britain. Remember Prince Andrew, the disastrous British royal who ruined his cushiony career on live TV. The British Police Department has decided to give him a clean chit. It has decided to not act against Prince Andrew. A quick recap. Prince Andrew is the second son of Queen Elizabeth II. He is 9th in the line to the throne. And he is 61. A woman named Virginia Giuffre has accused the royal of sexual assault. The story dates back 20 years. Giuffre was 17 and was trafficked by late US financier Jeffrey Epstein to have sex with Prince Andrew. A 17-year-old is a minor in most countries, and sex with a minor is rape. But in the UK, the age of consent is 16, so the prince gets away there. But sex trafficking and sex abuse remain criminal, in Britain or outside it. So when Gufre served the prince with a sexual assault lawsuit in August, the British police were expected to run a probe. Run a probe they did, that too at lightning speed. It's October and the police have already concluded the probe. We are taking no further action, they said. What kind of probe did they conduct? There is no word on that. Virginia Gufre has stated that she was lent out for sexual purposes. The prince knew that, and he sexually abused her at the home of Epstein's girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell. Prince Andrew denies this. He says he has no recollection of meeting Gufre. Maybe he remembers this photo. That's Prince Andrew, Gufre and Maxwell. Buckingham Palace has called the case false and without foundation. Is a fair trial too much to ask for in Britain? Equality is a very simple concept. But it is very hard for the monarchy-obsessed country to grasp. The British royals are above the law. They get away with racism, car crashes, involvement in sex trafficking. The royals have repeatedly proved themselves untouchable. The sex abuse allegations forced Prince Andrew to step back from his royal duties. But that's all it could do. Had this been in another country, British parliamentarians would have been the first to spend precious house hours rallying for justice. British activists would have marched to the embassy in protest. Where are these people now? Bureau Report, WION World is One.
I want to end tonight's show with a story that has really bothered me. Here it is. Indira Nui says she has never asked for a salary hike. Now, for those of you not familiar with Indira Nui, I can introduce her by saying that Indira Nui is a brand in herself. She's the former CEO of Pepsi. She grew up in India. She got an MBA from Yale. She went on to become one of the biggest names in the corporate world. In 2006, Indira Nui became one of the few female CEOs of corporate America. She also became a role model for young girls in India and the world over. At 65, Nui is among the world's most powerful women, the kind of powerhouse that every girl aspires to be. And honestly, Indira Nui has helped a lot of young women believe in themselves, be it by setting an example through her career, or the words in her books, or her powerful speeches. In 2014, for example, while speaking at the Aspen Ideas Festival, Indira Nui addressed a very practical issue. She said a woman's biological cycle clashes with her career cycle. It's a total, complete conflict, she said. But the challenge is to fight it out. It's unfiltered conversations like these that encourage women to take on the work-life battle head-on without feeling guilty. So it bothers me when women like Indira Nui say something like, "I've never, ever, ever asked for a raise." That's a quote. And here's the rest of it. "I find it cringe-worthy," she says. "I cannot imagine working for somebody and saying my pay is not enough." These words set the wrong example. They normalize not asking for a raise, not asking for what a woman thinks she's worth. Words like these normalize unequal pay. Women are anyway not paid at par with men, the world over. Indira Nui was not either, by the way. Reports say that in her final year in PepsiCo, she was not paid at par with her male counterparts across the sector. And Indira Nui may have been fine with that, but no woman should be. Did you know that in the US, a woman earns 82 cents for every dollar a man earns for doing the very same job? It is unfair. How will this change unless women speak up? Unless women ask for their rightful salary, ask for their rightful equality, glorifying not being assertive enough, not asking for a hike, being embarrassed to ask for a raise is not cool. It never should have been. It's a disservice to women, a disservice to all the young girls who aspire to be an Indira Nui one day. In the same interview, she said that she once turned down a raise. This is what she said. One year, the board gave me a raise and I said, I don't want it. They said, why not? It was right after a financial crisis and I said, I don't want the raise. Well, good for her and PepsiCo. But you know, this is something you don't want to celebrate. Indira Nui may have had the financial luxury to turn down a raise. Most women do not because they don't get enough to begin with. In Silicon Valley, for example, women earn 40 to 70% less than their male counterparts. 40 to 70%. A female MBA graduate earns around $4,600 less than her male classmate in their first job. What should she do about it, if not ask for a raise? As things stand now, women prefer moving out. A Randstad survey found that 60% of the women have never negotiated with an employer over pay. They choose to move out instead. They make a lateral move to improve their pay. Another study found that just 12.5% women negotiated their money compared to 52% men. And you know, this is the problem. Asking for a good pay has somehow become an unfeminine thing. This is how the corporate world has programmed us. Staying low, not being assertive during meetings, being comfortable with staying in the background, all of this is seen as ideal behavior. And this is exactly the stereotype that icons like Indira Nui need to break and not feed into. Because otherwise, our world will never value women at work. Women will never be treated as equals, given their due, even if they ask for it. Here's what an Australian study found. While women were as likely as men to ask for raises, they were 25% less likely to receive them. What explains this? The corporate world is a funny place. It likes maintaining status quo, the gender hierarchy. So a woman needs to be disruptive if she is to rise to the top. Break the taboos and stereotypes. Speak up during meetings. Don't be afraid to make your point. Lean in and take your share of the pie. So, dear women, for once, do not listen to Indira Nui. And don't be shy, ever, of asking for a pay raise. I think that's a good note to end on. We leave you with Gravitas Images. Thanks for watching.